Hello, everyone. Today we are talking about, continuing our discussion essentially on program evaluation and needs assessments. So last week we were focused primarily on needs assessments, and we did the needs assessment blog. And so what I think I should have done in hindsight is probably post a little bit of a video lecture on how we were basically shifting focus at this point. So right now, especially with this week's discussion, we're really going to be focusing on the program evaluation project, your final paper, which I had mentioned before. I'm in the process of conceptualizing it in a different way, looking at the original assignment and the rubric that was associated with it. I just kind of want to tweak it a little bit. For one, I don't want to read a 10-page paper from each one of you at the end of this semester. That is incredibly lengthy. So a little bit of this is the revision process is selfish on my part. So one of the things I'm probably going to do is shorten the page length. The other thing is that in looking at the program evaluation project, and the flow of it, the way that I kind of described it in the syllabus and the way it's been done is that really kind of looking at a program hypothetically, right? And the last thing that I want you to do is have to make up the results of a program that you have hypothetically developed, a counseling program that you are hypothetically implementing, and then you've got these fake people that you're assessing, and then you're measuring outcomes. And I can't imagine, would I really require you to make up some fake statistics or do a fake ANOVA analysis? I mean, no, I'm not going to require you to do any of that. If I wanted you to process some actual data and do a statistical analysis, really I should be giving you the numbers to do that. I don't want to read fake information about stats that you're just making up, and I don't want you to have to make up stats at the end of the day. So what I'm thinking about doing, and again, I'm going to really work diligently in the next week or so to provide an outline and structure and a rubric for you for the program evaluation project so that you have a better idea of where to go, because it is going to be due sooner than later. But what I'm thinking about doing is just kind of condensing. And so what I really want you to be focusing on in terms of the project, and in terms of this discussion, is the needs assessment part of it, which is, or an introduction, the needs assessment, looking at your program or the proposed program, if you will, developing some concrete objectives, developing a logic model, and so that you guys understand what a logic model is, really honing your skills and developing outcome objectives, so those measurable, attainable, using that SMART framework for developing an objective statement. And so I want to see all of that, and then I'll probably just have you basically report on what your analysis might look like, what types of statistical analyses you think you might use, depending on how you're measuring the outcomes for the proposed program. So rather than just giving me a hypothetical, this is how it went, I just really do want to see what your thoughts are on how you would analyze the information after you implemented the program that you're proposing. So I hope that makes a little bit more sense. I hope that maybe eases your mind a little bit in terms of what might be expected at the end of the semester. And what I really do want to do, so some of you will see that on the needs assessment blog, I put some comments. Some of you might have got emails. Some of you might not have anything yet because I'm a little bit behind on it. What I really want to do is help guide you through the process, because each one of you is going to have a different program evaluation project. Each one of you has a different area of focus, a different topic, a different population that you're exploring, and different objectives. And so I would love to be able to facilitate your understanding in terms of what you're wanting to do with the project, yourself, what you're hoping to accomplish from it. So please stay tuned. If I haven't gotten in touch with you, I will. Certainly I'll post either on the blog or send you an email, but anybody can contact me, email me with any questions you have about the project, and the development of objectives, and the development of or the refinement of your needs assessment, and all of that, because I really want you guys to be successful in the project. That's my main goal as an instructor, really, is to ensure that you all are successful, and I can certainly modify what I do on my end to ensure that happens. It's kind of my teaching philosophy. So with that, let's get into the actual content for this week. So there's been some information you were reading. Obviously, the chapter, we're looking at chapter 10 on program evaluation. Some of this may be your first exposure to counseling program evaluation. And the textbook does talk a lot about school counseling, because program evaluation and school counseling is something that's done all the time. I mean that all the time. And really, if we're thinking about counseling program evaluation in other types of settings, whether it's a state VR agency, private practice, inpatient treatment facilities, hospital settings, rehabilitation facilities, wherever it might work, wherever you might work in the future, whether or not you know it, the programs that are there are always being evaluated, because there are groups of stakeholders. There are individuals that play a key role in the provision of services and the provision of the program that you're working for, that want to know and need to know if the program is working, how it's functioning, is it efficient, is it effective, are the strategies being used actually working, is it making a difference for the population being served. And more often than not, all of that information is kind of aggregated in a data format and pushed out to the people that hold the money. And so, essentially in our field, much like any field, any kind of industry, we're part of program evaluation is to justify that yes, the product that we're presenting, the services being provided are working and beneficial. And yes, please let us keep our agency open and let's all have jobs. So this might be your first exposure to program evaluation in a more formal format. And we want you to understand in this program that you may be in charge of doing a program evaluation at some point, whether or not you're the head person doing it and writing up the report, who knows, but life can take you anywhere in this career. So you may be actually doing a program evaluation at some point. And hopefully I can give you some actual examples of what that might look like. I know Dr. Glenn let you guys know about a recent grant that we were awarded. And so a lot of this stuff is really fresh in my mind right now, because it's exactly what we're doing as we start to implement the program that we proposed in our grant proposal. And so now we've got it, and then now we actually have to develop the program, meet with stakeholders, develop objectives, and then we're going to be implementing the program as we move along in the next 5 years, and then evaluate it as we go along as well. So again, kind of looking at program evaluation and counseling, when we think about counseling, clinical mental health counseling, rehabilitation counseling, when we're thinking about ourselves as counselors, we're always doing both formal and informal evaluations of our work. I mean, we have annual reviews, right? We have formal evaluations. Whenever I worked in the VR, not the VR, state VR system, whenever I worked in private practice with Voc Rehab, I mean, we had goals, we had outcome goals for our clients. So I had my caseload of clients, and each year annually I had to get a certain number of those clients off of my caseload and successfully into an employment setting. Ideally full-time employment that was similar to the employment that they had prior to being out on long-term disability. But there was a specific number, I think it was like 21 of my clients annually I had to get back to work. And if I did not meet those goals, then essentially counselors were put in on an performance improvement plan. And there was even one guy that got fired because he didn't meet the goal after like 2 years of working. So we're constantly evaluating ourselves, whether formally in that way and formally evaluating maybe our supervisors are formally evaluating us if we're under supervision for LPC. We've got somebody, that external person, looking at our work, looking at our treatment plans, and saying, let's change and modify this based on what I know about, working with this specific population, or, offering feedback about the techniques we might be using, the interventions that we're using. And then we might modify these plans. We might modify what we're doing. We might modify the work that we're doing. And so we're essentially evaluating ourselves. That's all it is. And so program evaluation in the more formal way and looking at a full-blown program, a program being implemented by an agency, for example, then you've got a more robust evaluation process. And ultimately, like if we're looking at ourselves as counselors, we're reporting our outcomes, right? Our outcomes would be how many clients, cases we've closed, how long they stay on our caseload, the progress that they're making, the amount of time it takes them to make progress. And so we are reporting all of this information to somebody, you know, even if we're in private practice, we are reporting outcomes for our clients, typically to insurance companies, to show that the services that we're providing, again, are effective and that our clients are benefiting from the services. So in terms of like evaluation versus accountability, the textbook does a nice job separating the two. And I've got another, there's an article, one article, two articles in the program evaluation resources folder that's coming up in the module that provides a little bit more detailed information. But just so you can make sure not to confuse the two, program evaluation uses specific tools, strategies, principles to assess and improve the effectiveness and impact of the programs and services that are being provided to populations. And so we are really looking at the work that's being done. We are hoping to improve the effectiveness. We're hoping to improve the outcomes. We're hoping that all of that will benefit the population that we're working with. And so the program evaluation does just that. It evaluates what we're doing and the work that we're doing. Counseling accountability is the output of all of it. So once we've evaluated the program, we've assessed the impact, the overall impact of the program that we've implemented. We're to hold ourselves accountable to this. We're providing this information to stakeholders, to supervising authorities, to show them, these outside entities, how effective the program was, how efficient the program was. And again, kind of the other side of that is so that the stakeholders and the supervising authorities will say, great, it's working, continue doing it. We'll keep paying you for this job. So to give you an example, so if you'll look on page 202 of the text, there's a couple of examples that Effort gives of counseling program evaluation ideas, kind of the setup for it and steps that we need to go through if we're thinking about developing some type of program and then evaluating the program. So if you're looking at the scenario on 202 with the college counseling scenario, just to recap it, we've got a woman named Martha. She's in her first year as a counselor at a university counseling clinic. If you're on campus at WVU, just think of it as, Caruth Center. So we've got a brand new novice counselor coming in and working at a clinic. She's in Alabama in this particular case. She notices that the student body overall is very ethnically diverse, with about 50% of students being from a minority population, which that's really ethnically diverse. If you think about WVU, we're not very diverse. Certainly not 50%, although that would be great if we were. But so she's noticing as in her first year as a counselor at the clinic that even though the student population is about 50% from a minority population, that only about 20% of the clients at the clinic identify as a minority student. And so she thinks to herself, that's not the way it should be, because generally speaking, if we're serving people to the best of our abilities, if we got a 50-50 student population, then we should be seeing the same reflected in those that are being provided with counseling services at that university, right? Hopefully that makes sense. So the first step is kind of that brainstorming for Martha, the why. Why is it like this? And so maybe a first step for her would be what you guys have been doing with your literature reviews and the annotated bibliographies, right? So she might think, well, is it like this for everybody that has a diverse campus for student body populations? Or is it just that in general, the research has showed us that minority students are less likely to seek counseling services? Has something already been done in this area? Has somebody else proposed a project to increase that number? So what her first steps might be are just to gather information, to get more informed, well-informed, to educate herself on why this might be happening, or to see if it's just her, if it's just her university, if it's just something that maybe is unique to her setting, and then that would be even more telling. So second, when she's developing kind of this program or considering a potential program to implement within the counseling clinic, she wants to include certain people, right? These are the stakeholders. So because she's at a university counseling clinic, she's probably going to include the director of the counseling clinic. That would be smart, very smart of her. She might reach out to the diversity and inclusion office. She might reach out to, let's say there's a student organization that is specifically for minority students. She might reach out to the president of that. She might reach out to a couple of the students that are currently receiving services at the clinic to figure out how they learned about the service, how they came to the decision to become a client of the service. So she might meet with a robust group of individuals. Maybe she's picking somebody out of the community as well, that has some interest in the counseling clinic there. Who knows? But so stakeholders are the ones that have some type of connection, some type of tie to the actual program that either the person is hoping to develop or that they're currently assessing. Then she's going to be conducting a needs assessment, right? And so that is the actual survey, the actual analysis of the issue. So she might perceive there to be a problem. It's one thing to perceive there to be a problem. It's another to actually do a needs assessment to figure out if it actually isn't, if there's a given need there. So what she might do with that is say, the best way to do this to figure out why students aren't coming in, minority students aren't coming in as frequently as non-minority students, as majority students. She might just develop a 10-question survey to give to minority students that come to the clinic to say, again, how did you learn about the services? What made you come in here? What issues are you hoping to get addressed? Are your needs being met by the clinic? Shima would obviously take a lot of time to figure out what questions to ask within that part of the needs assessment. She might also go to other counselors within the clinic and see if they've noticed the same pattern. She might pull records from the clinic to see if maybe this is a new issue. Maybe 5 years prior, they were seeing that about 50% of the population of the clinic, so the patients, if you will, the student patients at the clinic were minority students, and then that number kind of dwindled. So she might pull some information from the clinic itself, some of the data and the statistics they've gathered, and reported back to the university, because obviously a counseling clinic is going to be reporting some stuff back to the university as a whole. Again, that would lead to the accountability piece of this, right? So that would be the needs assessment. So let's say from that, she discovers that, there's a problem, that it seems that, that her school is unique, that other university systems where they've got a robust minority population of students doesn't really see the same issue happening in their counseling clinic. Maybe it's just a consistent issue within this Alabama counseling clinic that only about 20% of clients being served are minority students. And so she's going to develop specific objectives. This is what she hopes the outcome will be. And so a specific objective for her would be, after I implement my program, the program being some type of outreach to minority students to get them engaged in the counseling clinic. That's going to be the goal of the project, right? Would be to increase the number of minority students being seen in the clinic. That's the overall goal. A specific objective could be that after a 6-month program that she's implementing where she's marketing information to minority populations. Maybe she goes to different student organizations and gives a presentation about the university counseling clinic and the benefits. Maybe she's reaching out to the dorms for freshman students to let them know that the service is available. She's taking all of these steps. So she might say after a 6-month period, the University Counseling Clinic in Alabama will see a growth of 10% in the number of minority students at the counseling clinic. And so when we're thinking about objectives, we're thinking very specifically about what we hope the outcome of our program will be, okay? And that's what we're focusing on this week is developing a logic model and giving me one objective, developing one objective that follows the SMART objective format. So after she's developed these objectives, okay, then she's going to implement the program, right? Then she's going to actually produce what she's talked about. And so maybe she will go out and maybe she develops a brochure to hand out to freshmen during orientation. Maybe she goes to the English 101 classes because everybody's got to take English 101. And she talks to all the students about the counseling program or the counseling clinic at her school and hopes to increase the number of minority students being served. So she does all of these things, let's say in spring semester, and then she analyzes whether or not it worked, right? Then she goes back to the counseling clinic, says, let me pull the numbers again. Let's see if all this stuff worked. Did it make a difference? Did I reach the projected outcome? The hope, I would hope that, so many X amount of students are now being seen that identify as a minority population as a minority student. And then she's going to report to, who's she going to report to? The stakeholders, the people that were included at the beginning. So she's going to report all this information back to that group of individuals to say, look, this is what I discovered. This is the program that I implemented. This is how it worked out. And ideally, if it worked out really well, she's probably going to report it to people outside of that initial stakeholder group, higher ups in a university setting, provost, dean for student and academic affairs, the president of the university, people like that. So they could say, wow, Martha, thank you for doing all of this and for increasing the number of minority students being served by our counseling clinic. Kudos to you. So that's a very, very rapid fire example of a program and evaluation and all the steps that might go into the process. So when we're thinking about program evaluations and the questions that we're asking about the needs of the population being served. Is there actually a need to do the program? Is there actually a need to implement the service that we're thinking we're going to implement? What good would it do? Who are we serving? In what context are we doing it? Are the services already being provided? If so, why aren't they working as we hoped? Who's providing the service to these individuals? What are the current outcomes? What are the outcomes that we hope to achieve by implementing the program? Lots of terms to know, but the ones that I want you to be most aware of are the difference between formative evaluation and summative evaluation. And I feel like we've covered stakeholders at this point, so hopefully you know who the stakeholders are. Formative evaluation, during the course of implementing any kind of program, you're always going to be checking to see whether or not the program is effective. So for instance, the program that Dr. Glenn and I and our lovely colleague in Georgia have proposed and are now being told to actually implement, we are going to be basically developing some training for state voc rehab counselors around providing pre-employment transition services within school systems to individuals, to youth with disabilities in a group setting, ideally, and also kind of training on how to talk to employers, because that's what we do as rehab counselors, we talk to employers. And so as we start to develop our program, when we start to develop the curriculum, when we start to implement the training through workshops, we're going to be evaluating ourselves the entire time. And we've told our funders and our stakeholders that we will be doing this evaluation, and we will report that formative evaluation to them as we go along in hopes that they will give us some feedback and that we can modify and address any issues that come up. Because when you think of developing any kind of program, providing any kind of service, what you hope to get and what you put on paper at the beginning is probably not exactly what you're going to get at the end. Summative evaluation is the end, okay? And so after you have implemented the program and you've done all the formative evaluation, you've done all the assessments, you're at the very end of your program, you want to see if your objectives and outcomes were achieved, you want to see if it worked or not, then you do the summative evaluation. Essentially, it's like the results. It's like the results of a large-scale research study like we've been talking about, right? That's a summative evaluation in terms of project evaluation. Lots of different models for program evaluation. One of the articles talks about a model of program evaluation as well, but I just kind of put a 9-step. I wish I could get 10. I don't know, maybe I could have divided out number 7 a little bit better and got a nice even number. But what we've been doing so far is really focusing on the needs assessment, even some strategic planning in terms of you guys developing your ideas, figuring out the population you want to work with for the project itself, and now we're kind of getting into the objective development piece of all of it. So remember that we're for the project itself, we're not actually going to be implementing it, or I'm not expecting you to say that you implemented it and make up the numbers. But that's the overall model of program evaluation. In terms of reporting, because reporting is incredibly important, right? We don't implement programs that are typically funded by somebody else without being expected to report what happened at the end. And so the reporting of all of this will include an introduction that will explain to our stakeholders why we wanted to implement the program, the purpose of it, what general goals that we had, some justification for developing the program that would come, through a literature review, through any kind of surveys that we did, stakeholder meetings that we might have conducted. We're going to provide a description of the program and the services. So we're going to be providing a description of what's currently happening, what's missing. Then we're going to discuss the evaluation design itself. That's where the objectives come in, what assessments are being used, the evaluation tools, how we're going to measure the outcomes, and then how we're going to report those numbers, the data analysis piece of it. So if you conduct a survey, let's say you do a real quick one on Qualtrics and it spits back a bunch of numbers to you. Let's say you have the ability to run those numbers through SPSS. It gives you lots of nice graphs and pretty pictures. That's going to be the actual data analysis piece of it, and then you're presenting those results. The what happened, what was the outcome. And finally, you're going to be discussing your findings and providing some recommendations. Did you meet your objectives? If yes, okay, great. What's next? Is there sustainability to your project? What do you hope to achieve moving forward? If it didn't work as you expected, then the discussion of the findings and recommendations is going to address all of that. You're going to figure out, you're really going to be a little bit self-critical about the program that you implemented to say, this didn't work because maybe my outreach was not as well developed as I hoped. What next? I'll market the program a little bit better or do a better job at engaging with additional stakeholders. Just an example. So, logic models, very important in the overall process because they offer a nice little graphic illustration of the steps of the program that you hope to be implementing. It's a nice, quick way to visually provide stakeholders, typically funders for the program, supervisors, authority figures, with an overview of why the heck it matters, what you hope to be achieving, what activities you're going to be implementing, and what your overall goal is intended to be. I've got a number of examples of a logic model within the resources area of this module. So what I want you to do is go and print those out. Save them to your desktop at the very least, because that's what you're going to be doing this week, is really developing a logic model. And by developing a logic model, I mean you're actually going to be developing, like in a separate Word document, a nice graphic illustration of the steps of the program that you think you might be implementing for the project. Counseling program related again. So we're always thinking about counseling programs, and I know that that was a point of confusion too, but we're going to be looking specifically at counseling related programs for the project itself. And so within the logic model, I want you to start focusing on counseling programs. So you're going to be thinking about the goals, the objectives, the process, and then logic models do contain a narrative. So, with any kind of graphic illustration of anything within a report, you're going to be explaining it in a narrative form. The narrative really will be the place where you're talking specifically about your objectives, okay? And so objectives, again, are very important when you're thinking about program evaluation, because you have to have something to come back to. You can't, we're not doing any kind of exploratory study in a program evaluation, okay? It's much different than that. And so there's not a general question of, does this impact this group of people? You want to be very clear about your objectives. So you want to follow those SMART guidelines. So objectives need to be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic and timed, because you're not going to have, 10 years to implement a well, I mean, no, you're not. Typically, these programs are relatively short in a counseling setting. So objectives are very specific. They're measurable, meaning that you're framing, when you're writing the objectives, you're using this ABCD model for writing them. And so go back to the needs assessment module for some ideas of how to write objectives. And I've also provided some tips for doing that within this module as well. But you want to be specific about the audience, so who you're talking about, the participants, right, of the program. Who are the people that I'm focusing on? Who will receive the treatment, if you will? Okay, so we need to talk about the audience, the behavior. What do we want our audience? What do we want the participants to be doing? Are they expanding knowledge? Are they decreasing anxiety? Are they developing coping mechanisms? So you want to be specific about the behavior that you're hoping to achieve with your audience. The conditions being met and the description. So those are the very specific, again, the goals. What setting is it going to happen in? What numbers are you hoping to achieve if you're, increasing or decreasing some type of outcome? So you want to be very specific in terms of writing the objectives. And I'm being vague here because objectives are incredibly different for every single person all the time. But there are two types of objectives mainly. So there's process objectives and outcome objectives. The process objectives are the ones you're really going to be talking about if including those in the actual logic model itself. A little general, broad. They reflect kind of the process, the overall process, obviously, what people will be doing, as part of the project that you're proposing. The outcome objectives are very specific. They reflect what the intended outcome will be, the very specific intended outcome, and they'll be included in the model, the logic model narrative. And then finally, just because I sometimes like to provide myself a visual illustration of what I mean by all of this. So because there can be a lot of confusion between purpose statements, goals, objectives, and outcomes, I hope will provide you with a nice little hierarchy of what you guys have been doing. So you've proposed an issue, right, so far. You completed parts of a needs assessment, or what can be put into your needs assessment, and thought of different goals for the program. You might need to tailor them at this point if you haven't been focusing on counseling program. But I don't think that would be an issue for anybody, and please reach out to me if you have questions. So the needs assessment will help you define what the goal of the program will be. When you're developing the program itself, you're going to be developing the objectives from the goal, okay, the specific objectives. And then once you've implemented the program and you're at the evaluation piece of it, you're looking at the outcomes. And outcomes are going to be very dependent on the objectives, right? We can never predict what the outcomes will be to a T. We can say what we hope the outcomes will be, and that's what goes into the objectives. So the objectives include what we hope those outcomes will be. The outcomes are what they are. The outcomes are the unknown. The outcomes are the thing that keeps us up late at night, stressing about the project that we've been awarded. And so the evaluation piece of it will help us figure out what the outcomes of the project were or are. And then the reporting piece comes after that. So hopefully that provides some clarity in project evaluation. And if not, please let me know, because I, again, would be very willing to provide additional clarification to you all. But if you have questions, again, email me or post on the questions for Dr. Simpson, as I would assume if it's a general question about project program evaluation and design, logic models, things of that nature, developing objectives, other people are going to have the same question as well. So I'll leave that where it is, and this took half an hour. Oh my God, that's so long. But all right, I'll see you all in the discussion board.